Hey guys, how's it going? I got the opportunity to meet up with Matt Cross from the Gaming on Linux podcast, and Matt's a really awesome guy. I wanted to say thanks to him first for, having me on the podcast, because that was just a great experience. We started recording the show for 4:30, something like that, and by the time we got done with the first portion of the podcast, the sun had gone down, and I had forgot to bring my studio lights with me, so we ended up just using the overhead light in my friend Matt's, guest bedroom. My cameras don't do well in low light, so that's why the quality's kind of grainy. And also, one of the cameras, the one that was doing coverage of me, ended up shutting off after like 6 or 7 minutes of recording, so I had to be creative and fill in the portions where I'm talking. But anyway, take a watch. And if you like what you see here, you can check out the Gaming on Linux podcast over on gamingonlinux.com. There's a link in the description. I'll take you right there. But yeah, on with the show.
So. What's going on, boys and girls? I'm Matthew Cross. I'm one of the primary host of the Gaming on Linux podcast. I want to thank the Linux Gamer for having me on to have this topic of discussion. That should be interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We'll try and kick the beehive again.
It's the Linux community. It doesn't matter where you step. You're going to step on a beehive.
Yeah.
System D.
Here we go. All right, let's get into this. I don't care.
Does it work? Okay, anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, man. I mean, you kind of co-opted my intro, but that's all right. Oh, that's cool. But yeah, so the topic of this discussion is the debate between console performance a holdover of the 16-bit marketing? The Sega versus Nintendo debate, is what we're talking about now, about 60 frames per second, 100 frames per second. Is all that based on Sega does what Nintendo don't?
Is it a holdover from the 16, 32-bit, and 128-bit era? Oh, man. All I can remember from that entire time was the Atari Jaguar claiming that it was the first 64 or 100 or whatever bit system it was claiming to be.
Yeah.
And then people were trying to prove that it was accurate. Do you know the only good game on that entire system was AVP?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was it.
But just don't try to play with that controller, oh god. I think it is somewhat of a holdover, honestly, nowadays. We get this kind of debate almost on the PC side of things too. I mean, frame rate is a big thing for gamers on PC. I think there's a certain level of expectation that I don't think is necessarily wrong. It was like last gen, we were talking about, we can do high def at 60 frames a second. Did any game from the 360 or PS3 run at 1080p at 60 frames a second? No. I remember playing Madden 07, and that 30 frames a second was well choppy enough to, induce a seizure. It was bad. When you can sit there and when it's on the pause screen and just see the stuttering in the frame rate at 30 frames. That's locked.
Yeah.
That's a problem. So I don't think it's wrong to have a level of expectation given that because gamers look at the PC end of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot, from my perspective, where a lot of it comes to console gamers. Some of it is the tech. We have most PC gamers are 4K or higher now. Mm-hmm. What are most TVs? You're talking 1080p, 720p.
Right.
We're not spending $4,000 on TVs anymore.
Yeah. And
if you are for a 720p, I'm sorry. I remember doing that.
Yeah.
The simple fact of the matter is that's, I don't think a bad expectation I have, because let's be honest, TVs are cheap. Mm-hmm. They're all 60 frames, 60 or 59, whatever, 59 hertz refresh. I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation given the commodity value of what is consumer hardware to expect 60 frames a second, which is smooth gameplay for most people, according to PC gamers, on consumable hardware.
Yeah.
So is it a holdover? I think it's probably an argument that's more of the whole console war thing. That's my take.
Well, I think that the gaming ecosystem, whether you're a console gamer or you're a PC gamer or somewhere in between, we're all one, like it's one ecosystem. And when it comes to, back in the 16-bit era, when the architectures between the different consoles were fundamentally different, and marketing was actually trying to push, like, we have blast processing on the Sega Genesis, and Nintendo doesn't,
Yeah.
Like, that kind of marketing, I think, when I was raised in that kind of commercial environment, it kind of, I think maybe our generation, it did kind of instill this fear of inadequacy when it comes to gaming, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we actually, like, creating an ecosystem where we're having fun and playing games, or are we trying to just look for reasons to fight with each other when it comes to that kind of stuff? Like specs on your console versus specs on your TV. I mean, on your PC, right? Like, it's a tough question.
As far as going back to the 16-bit and the 32-bit, where it was mostly the most predominant, you had SNES and you had the Genesis at the time. This also transferred over to when the Sega Game Gear came out, and I think it was the Game Boy Color.
Yeah,
maybe something like that. It wasn't the original Game Boy. It was another reiteration of the Game Boy. Personally, for me, I prefer the Game Gear.
Mm-hmm.
Did it eat batteries like there's no tomorrow? Yeah, 6 hours of 6 AA's.
Mm-hmm.
I remember because I still have mine.
Oh wow! Yeah,
I still play Sonic. I still play. There's an RPG that I play on there occasionally. My sound card on that thing is starting to go, and I can tell. But plugging some headphones, hey look, it still works. Hey Apple, headphones still have uses.
But to that point, with your Game Gear versus the Game Boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which console sold more?
At one point, it was 50-50. It really depends on how you look at it.
Well, I mean, historically.
Historically, though, it's always been the Game Boy. The Game Boy
Right.
kicks everything.
Why is that, though, with the specs that are clearly inferior to the Game Gear?
Because it's the gameplay.
Right.
Yeah, let's be honest. It is the gameplay. It is the game library. It's about the games.
It's about the games, exactly.
And so, while specs are great, at the end of the day, is the game fun?
Right.
Because what are video games? They're games, and we play them.
Yeah.
So what's important is not graphics, while they're nice, gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how we play games. Gameplay.
Yeah. I guess my take on it is you can have a game that has the greatest, most realistic graphics, right? And you can play the hell out of that game at 100 frames per second, 144 frames a second, whatever you want. But in 5 or 10 years, those graphics are going to look pretty shitty, honestly. Yeah. They won't look real anymore. They're not going to be impressive. And sometimes, the game developers will sacrifice the gameplay to make the game look nice. Whereas you can still go play Super Mario 64 and it runs fantastic and the graphics still hold up because they weren't trying to make the game look beautiful. Although it does. It's artistic.
Yeah, and do note, to steal a line from Angry Joe, unfortunately, the clouds in Super Mario 64 still look better than the ones in Mafia 3.
Yes. That's awesome.
I'm just going to leave it at that. And that was a game that came out 20 years ago. Put that in perspective, boys and girls.
Oh my god. Super Mario 64 came out 20 years ago.
No, 95, 96, around there. Welcome.
I just had an existential crisis. You had to excuse me for a second.
Yeah, you're welcome. I seem to do that when it comes down to video games because people don't realize.
Yeah. Our
generation is video gamers.
Yeah. Guess
what? The people who buy the video games have gotten older.
Yep.
But realistically, though, I think a lot of it is some of it is that marketing. Because it was really like you had your I'm Nintendo, I'm Sega, like that was the shtick.
Yeah, and I mean, and at the time they had a reason to talk about how the consoles were different. But when we have the PS4 and the Xbox One, and they are fundamentally the same system, they're just running different operating systems. We don't need to be arguing about which is superior. Oh. Like. And same with PC and consoles. Where why do we have to fight with each other about video games when we can all come together and be like, yo, just give us some fun games. And that's why I like indie games more than the AAA games, because that's where they seem to take a lot of risks and have the most fun.
I like the indie games because there's that risk mentality and they're willing to go on to other platforms that Linux and SteamOS and there was one guy that released one for free DOS for some reason, just for the hell of it. So.
Oh, was that?
It might have been Brian.
Retro City Rampage.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So it was just like whatever. Right. They do it for crafts and giggles, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think for our generation, it got so ingrained into us. But ever since then, though, it's happened with everything. I mean, while we're talking video games here, I don't want to call it a duopoly because realistically, Nintendo kind of does its own thing. Yeah. But a lot of the stuff that we argue about, it's the same stuff. You can argue Coke and Pepsi. You can, they taste different or they're made different. You can argue, Burger King, McDonald's, whatever you want to argue. There's always something that someone else is going to argue for. So, this is the same thing that, the Linux community runs into, though. You run Ubuntu, so you don't know how to install a Debian. It's just like that my distro can beat up your distro crap. Yeah. For me, I look at it like that type of stuff is kind of like you do with video games. To me, you're running Linux. What do you care? Right. You're not running Windows. You're not running Mac OS. Or you're not running I'm just going to say you're not running a bastardized version of BSD. So, why have the argument? Right. There's different technologies and the stuff, but at the core of it is the thing that you are passionate about, and someone's using it. Yeah. The high tide lifts all boats. Yeah. And, if Valve comes out and targets SteamOS, or targets Ubuntu as, what developers should build their games for, if you're running, a bleeding edge system, you can configure it however you want and get games to run. You can use the Steam runtime or not, and the games will work usually on your distro. So it's unless the shared libraries are messed up, we'll be honest.
But like I said, the high tide lifts all boats, and I don't think we should be having all these arguments internally with each other when we could be doing something much more productive and probably much more fun.
Which is the whole point of video games.
Exactly. So,
honestly, for me, I think it's a holdover that honestly just needs to go away. Yeah. Again, this is the same thing. If you want to talk strictly gaming, you still see it with the consoles. Sony versus Microsoft, because that's the AAA. Mm-hmm. Again, Nintendo for the last 4 generations has been doing its own thing. That is a shtick, and I don't understand it because we have gotten so far to the point of a console being a PC essentially, or a PC being a console. What's the difference that people harp on for the PlayStation and the Xbox? The Xbox runs DDR3 RAM. The PlayStation runs GDDR5. Yeah. Oh, that gives me who cares? Yeah. The processor's the same. The graphics card is essentially the same. Yeah. If this was the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and if you want to argue specs, okay, you're talking PowerPC versus a cell processor, and you can talk RAM and blah blah. That might have made sense that if you want to argue strict hardware. Mm-hmm. Now it's just it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So like the argument between the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, we should just let it die.
Yeah. I was gonna say after a while, because where did Sonic end up going?
Nintendo. And the fact that both games are still fun today, that's what it's all about.
I was going to say, because I have had a blast playing, I believe it was Sonic Adventures 2 on the Neo Geo.
There you go.
Need I say more? Yeah. How many people know what that console is?
I actually played Neo Geo when I was a kid.
Oh, sorry, I had the Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Right.
My bad.
Yeah.
That was the good one.
Yeah, that's what I had, was the Pocket Color. It was rad.
Yeah. Love that joystick.
Dude, that clicky joystick.
Yeah, it's still the best joystick
so
on any console.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a holdover, and it's just one of those things that I don't understand. I never will understand. I get people's perspective on it, but when it comes to the arguments now, I think we're so far removed from those times that it's a pointless argument. I mean, you can talk, like I said, you can talk like iOS and Android. They used to be so different. Now they're almost so similar. It's like...
Yeah.
For those that want to know, at one point iOS didn't let you change out keyboards.
Oh yeah, I remember that. But hey man, thanks for having me on your podcast, and thanks for being on my channel.
I appreciate it, man. I hope we can do this again. I love talking games. I love talking Linux, even though some people might disagree with that opinion. But at the end of the day, it's all with games.
Yeah, for sure.
Having fun playing.
Yep. If you guys like this conversation, how about you head over to gamingonlinux.com and check out the podcast that I was just on.
Yeah, I was going to say, we will hopefully have that up soon.
We'll try and launch these videos and the podcast at the same time. But thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate it.
All right.
All right. See you later, guys.